Hello everyone, we're standing here today at World Hydrogen Week organized by World Hydrogen Leaders. My name is Johann Wiebe, Executive Director from the Hydrogen Standard. With me here today is Mikaa Blugeon-Mered from SciencePo. Did I say it correct?
That's correct. I'm an adjunct lecturer on hydrogen diplomacy, geopolitics and markets at Sciences Po.
Fantastic, that's already half the introduction there, but I would like to go a little bit deeper. Tell us a little bit more about sort of the organization that you represent, work for, and yeah.
Well, it's a university, it's a policy school in France. Basically what we do over there is teach kids and also grown-ups about hydrogen diplomacy, politics and markets, because basically we need more people educated on hydrogen on these specific aspects. We're talking all day about certification, standards, policy, geopolitics and so on, and that's what we try to do.
Very nice. So on the subject of geopolitics, tell us a little bit about the different funding and the support from the governments across the world that we've seen. Actually, let's focus on Europe first.
Well, basically in Europe we have a very scattered mechanisms and support available. Basically you have France on the one hand that's basically supporting all kinds of hydrogen as long as it's low carbon, including nuclear power. Germany on the other hand and some of its allies in Europe don't want to support nuclear power. And basically things are changing quite a lot because 2 years ago or 3 years ago in the first wave of big hydrogen strategies from governments, it was all about green hydrogen. And now many governments, the German one included, are now seeking both green and or other kinds of low carbon hydrogen because, well, they need to accelerate and they want all kinds of molecules as long as it's low carbon. So things are moving forward. And then there's many mechanisms like IPCEIs and many other stuff because that's very technical. But what people can remember is that in Europe at the moment, Europe is leading in terms of policy support all across the world when it comes to hydrogen and all of its hydrogen derivatives as well, ammonia, e-methanol and so on, to decarbonize as fast as possible.
Tell us a little bit about that shift. You talked about some of the shift in the European sort of like regulation, the government, maybe some other governments as well, becoming a little bit more flexible in their approach as opposed to adopting also blue hydrogen and other sort of hydrogen strategies. Yes.
Well, yeah, things are changing because basically people are saying that with green hydrogen alone, maybe we won't get to the objectives for 2030 or 2035 as fast as we needed to. So some governments are willing to change and bring in some hydrocarbon-based, low-carbon hydrogen molecules. Some others, like France or Spain, don't. And that's really creating some tensions in Europe. That's one of the reasons why there's so many others, but we don't have time to cover them all. That's one of the reasons why in Europe it's taken more than 2.5 years between the first renewable energy directive targeting green hydrogen and other stuff as well, and the delegated act, so basically the implementation laws or text to basically govern the implementation of this directive on renewable energy. Now we have another package that's going through Parliament in Europe, which is the gas and hydrogen package, which is also going to cover and going to develop a number of tensions across the continent. So things are moving forwards, and things are moving forward sometimes with some kind of contention more than trying to be together and develop a continental approach.
Fair enough. We have also so many sort of characteristics, countries representing the whole European bloc. So in that sense, not surprising that a lot of opinions might differ even on the same subject, although all noses are still in the same direction, we say in the Netherlands. Let's take a little bit of a step back or maybe a step forward or a step into sort of the wider remit of the world, so to speak, and looking at different blocks. Thinking about Europe as a unity for a moment and sort of how it compares to maybe the US and China and some of the other regions. How do you see things there?
Yeah, there's a clusterization dynamic all across the world. Basically, you will see that in Europe, of course, when it comes to green hydrogen, especially now that the delegated acts of the RED II directive are being applied. But more than that, you will see the same thing in Africa, you will see the same thing in Southeast Asia, you will see the same thing, of course, in the Americas as well, with Latin America on the one hand and the US on the other hand at the federal level. So definitely this clustering dynamic is really what's, how can I put this? It's really what is defining this new wave of hydrogen development starting in 2022 and forward. So definitely this is changing quite a number of dynamics because before that, before 2022 or 2021, Europe was kind of alone, having a critical mass on green hydrogen in the world. Now we have the US on the one hand, which is coming in strong with more and more aggressive or at least self-affirming dynamics and rhetorics, especially compared to Europe, but also compared to China. And China is also trying to pick up the pace and be existing in this hydrogen geopolitics. And then you also have some underdogs that we don't talk about often, that are not even present yet in these kind of conferences, but are becoming very, very strong, like India, like Brazil, like South Africa. We often talk about Chile, Australia, and so on, but we've got some underdogs that are really coming strong now, developing laws, developing roadmaps, developing strategies, policy support mechanisms that really could change the game and the dynamics. And one last big area is the MENA region. And in the MENA region, definitely, they're trying to harness themselves towards Europe, with Europe, to basically sell the molecules over there. But because Europeans are maybe not responding enough to MENA wishes, basically they're also now looking at exporting towards Asia, and especially Korea and Japan. So definitely things are moving forward quite a bit.
Understandably, you don't want to bet all your eggs in one basket or put all on one horse, right? Diversify a bit in terms of your customers, never a bad strategy. You talked about actually those three sort of main regions. Yes, there's a lot of other regions as well, but in terms of the legislation, these tends to be leading, particularly on the hydrogen front. IRA versus Europe versus China. Walk us through that a little bit. What are the differences? What are the synergies or similarities?
All in 30 seconds. Okay, I'll try to do that. So game on. So in China, you've got a 5-year plan that was passed on in early 2022 that is actually really creating a very strong dynamic. Maybe even too much, because we're already seeing some kind of an oversupply in terms of electrolyzer manufacturing capacity in China, which is basically having some investors put the foot on the brake because, well, you don't want to oversupply. Of course, it's going to kill some market opportunities. So China is really moving forward quite fast, and at the same time maybe too fast. On the other hand, you've got the US with the IRA. We talked about it when the Biden administration and the Congress passed it into law in August 2022. Everybody thought, well, it's an easy text to put into motion. A lot of investors will go to the US, it's going to be so easy and so on. What we're seeing now, 1 year after IRA, is that there's two main consequences. The first one, well, investors are investing way more in so-called blue hydrogen, so hydrocarbon-based hydrogen with carbon capture, than in green hydrogen, by far, in the US. So IRA is definitely not missing the points, but it has been supporting more the oil and gas industry in the end than the green or renewables energy sector. That's one thing. And then the second thing when it comes to IRA is it's actually not that simple. And investors, regulators, and so on, lawyers are, of course, seeing this and helping companies navigate that. And because of this, now we're going back to Europe, many companies that had invested in Europe were willing to go to the US because of this IRA attraction are now going back into Europe saying, well, Europe may have been debating the so-called delegated acts that I've mentioned before for 2.5 years or something, but now it's there, it's clear, it's solid, and it's actually in the US now that the DOE, the federal government, and many other players are battling, especially when it comes to the additionality requirements, the zoning requirements, the time correlation requirements, just as what we've had in Europe over the past 2.5 years. So basically, I wouldn't say that the US are lagging behind. I'm just saying that nobody thought that this would happen in the US. It is happening. And that's, of course, is helping Europe staying up in the game.
What about harmonization? I mean, maybe it's a bit of a utopia to think that will ever be established on the regulation and the policy front, but nevertheless it will benefit business massively, and we need the industry to ramp up in an enormous tempo. Do you ever foresee that sort of emerging, particularly focused on Europe and the US in terms of the regulation there?
Absolutely, and I don't know when this video is going to be published, but I really suggest everyone to look at what's going to happen at COP28 in Dubai on December the 5th. December 5th, COP28, it's going to be the Energy Day, and on that day, you will have IPHE, which is basically the intergovernmental body creating some discussions between governments around hydrogen policy around the world, and ISO, the International Standards Organization. They will publish together the first harmonization attempt at defining a standard for low carbon hydrogen. So definitely we're just about to get there, and the reason why that is happening is because governments know that if they want to really develop that hydrogen sector and of course meet their 2030 or 2035 targets, then they will have to harmonize regardless of their competition otherwise. So it is happening. Multinational corporations are pushing for this. It is happening. See you in Dubai on December 5th.
COP28 it is. We'll be looking at that for sure. Thank you very much, Mikaa.
Thank you very much.